I was sitting in my favorite leather armchair, the one that's molded to my frame over 30 years, looking at a photo of my wife, Sarah. It was my 70th birthday. Sarah had passed away 5 years ago, and since then, the silence in our big house in Hills had become my primary companion. I wasn't lonely, though. I had my memories, and I had the pride of knowing that the Forster Engineering Group, the company I started in a rented garage, was now the backbone of the local economy. My daughter, Elisa, who is 45 and has always had a sharp eye for status, and my son, Mark, who's 40 and spent most of his life trying to prove he was as big a man as I am, had called me earlier that week. They told me they were coming over for a monumental birthday surprise. I expected a dinner, maybe a speech, or a framed collection of family photos. When they arrived, they weren't carrying a cake. Elisa was carrying a leather briefcase, and Mark was wearing a suit that cost more than my first 3 trucks combined. They didn't sit down. They stood in my living room like they were visiting a museum. Elisa reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of documents. She didn't say, "Happy birthday, Dad." She said, "Daniel, we've made an executive decision regarding the estate and your future care." I looked at Mark, expecting some flash of guilt, but he just looked at his watch. They told me that because they held the majority voting shares I had gifted them on their 18th birthdays out of love, they had voted to liquidate the family home and the surrounding 200 acres of timberland. They had already signed a deal with a luxury developer. The surprise was that they had already picked out a high-end retirement community 2 states away. I had 3 weeks to pack up 70 years of life. They thought they had me. They thought that because I had spent the last 5 years quietly grieving Sarah and staying out of the boardroom, my brain had turned to mush. Elisa even had the nerve to pat my hand and tell me that management was for the young, and I should enjoy my sunset years without the burden of property taxes. What they didn't realize is that I never truly left the boardroom. I just moved my desk to the basement. After they left, I didn't cry. I went down to my old safe and pulled out the original incorporation papers from 1985. Back then, Sarah and I were the only 2 employees. She was the one who insisted on a very specific clause in the bylaws. She used to say, "Daniel, kids are like weather. They can turn on you without warning." She made me include a founding partner's veto. It was a legal poison pill. The clause stated that as long as one of the original founding partners was alive and residing on the primary company-owned land, which was my house, no sale of company assets exceeding $1 million could be finalized without a unanimous founding signature. Elisa and Mark had the voting shares, sure, but they didn't have the founding shares. Those were still in my name, and a portion was still technically in Sarah's estate, which I controlled as the executor. I didn't call them to complain. I let them go ahead with their plans. I watched from my window as they brought developers onto the property. I watched Mark bragging to his friends about the 8-figure payout he was about to get. I even let them send a moving crew to my door. When the movers arrived, I simply handed them a cease and desist order and told them to go home. The real birthday surprise happened a week later at the final closing meeting at the bank. Elisa and Mark were there, pens in hand, ready to sign away my life to a group of billionaire developers. I walked into that conference room uninvited. Mark laughed when he saw me. He said, "Dad, we told you. The movers will handle everything. You shouldn't be here." I didn't say a word to him. I looked at the lead developer and the bank's legal counsel. I placed the original 1985 charter on the table. Open to page 42, paragraph 6. I told them, "The individuals attempting to sell you this land do not have the legal authority to move a single grain of dirt. This sale is a breach of the founding charter, and as the sole surviving founder, I am exercising my right to veto the transaction and dissolve the current board of directors for attempted embezzlement of estate assets." The room went cold. The lawyer for the developer took one look at the document and turned to Elisa. His face was like stone. He told her the deal was dead, and that his clients would be suing her for the millions in earnest money they had already spent on planning. Elisa started screaming. Mark looked like he was going to faint. They tried to argue that the clause was antiquated, but the bank's lawyers were already backing away from them like they were radioactive. By the time I left that office, I had regained full control of the Forster Engineering Group. I used my power as the sole director to freeze their trust funds and revoke their company credit cards. Since the cars they drove and the houses they lived in were technically company-owned assets, I gave them the same courtesy they gave me: 30 days to vacate. A month later, I was back in my leather armchair. My phone rang. It was Mark, sounding broken, asking for a loan to pay his mortgage. Then Elisa called, sobbing about how her reputation in the city was ruined. I looked at the photo of Sarah on the mantel, and I smiled. I didn't answer the phone. I just turned it off. I'd built a legacy for my children, but they were too greedy to realize that a legacy isn't something you take. It's something you earn. And if they want a place to stay, I heard there's a very nice retirement community 2 states away. I'm sure they can find a room there.